In the primordial depths of the cosmic waters, where the sweet freshwater Apsu mingled with the foundations of existence itself, Ea contemplated his greatest work. The god of wisdom and craftsmanship, master of the subterranean realm and keeper of divine secrets, had witnessed the struggles of early humanity with growing concern. These fragile beings, fashioned from clay and divine breath, stumble through their brief existence without understanding the fundamental forces that govern their world. They lived and died in ignorance, unable to comprehend the intricate workings of the cosmos or communicate effectively with the divine powers that shape their destiny. Ea recognized that humanity required a bridge between the mortal and immortal realms, a being who could serve as interpreter and guide. This intermediary would need to possess sufficient wisdom to understand divine mysteries while remaining connected enough to human experience to translate celestial knowledge into comprehensible teachings. The solution demanded unprecedented craftsmanship, a creation that would challenge the very boundaries between mortality and divinity. Working with materials both earthly and ethereal, Ea began the delicate process of fashioning his masterpiece. Unlike the mass creation of humanity, this endeavour required individual attention to every detail. The god gathered the finest clay from the riverbanks of the cosmic waters, clay that had been touched by divine essence and purified through countless ages. Into this substance he breathed not merely life, but understanding itself. The breath that animated Adapa carried within it fragments of cosmic knowledge, mathematical principles that governed the movement of celestial bodies, and linguistic structures that would allow communication across the divine-mortal divide. As Ea shaped the physical form, he imbued it with capabilities that exceeded normal human limitations while carefully maintaining mortal constraints. Adapa's mind received the capacity to perceive patterns invisible to ordinary humans, to understand the symbolic language through which the gods communicated their will, and to interpret omens and signs that appeared in natural phenomena. His memory became vast and precise, capable of storing and organizing the complex ritual knowledge necessary for proper divine worship and the maintenance of cosmic order. The god's most crucial decision involved the distribution of divine attributes. Ea granted Adapa wisdom that rivaled that of the gods themselves, understanding that approached omniscience in matters of earthly concern and divine protocol. This wisdom manifested not as abstract philosophical knowledge, but as practical understanding of how the world functioned at its deepest levels. Adapa could comprehend the agricultural cycles that sustained human communities, the astronomical observations necessary for accurate calendar keeping, and the ritual procedures required to maintain harmony between heaven and earth. However, Ea deliberately withheld the gift of immortality. This decision reflected both divine prerogative and practical necessity. The gods maintained their supremacy partly through their eternal nature, and granting immortality to a mortal being would fundamentally alter the cosmic hierarchy. More importantly, Adapa's effectiveness as an intermediary depended on his connection to human mortality. An immortal being might gradually lose touch with human concerns and limitations, becoming increasingly distant from those he was meant to serve. The completed Adapa emerged as a being of extraordinary complexity and capability. His physical appearance reflected his unique nature, bearing the dignity and presence of divine craftsmanship while maintaining recognizably human characteristics. His eyes held depths of understanding that marked him as different from ordinary mortals, and his bearing conveyed the authority of one who had been granted direct access to divine wisdom. Yet his form remained subject to human needs and limitations, requiring food, rest and shelter like any mortal being. Ea established Adapa in Eridu, the first city to emerge from the primordial waters and the initial point of contact between divine civilization and human society. This ancient settlement, built where the sweet waters of the Apsu met the earth, served as the perfect location for Adapa's work. The city itself embodied the connection between divine and mortal realms, its temples and structures reflecting celestial patterns while serving practical human needs. In Eridu, Adapa assumed the role of priest-king, a position that combined religious authority with temporal leadership. As priest, he served as the primary intermediary between the human community and the divine powers, conducting the elaborate rituals necessary to maintain cosmic order and ensure divine favour. His wisdom allowed him to perform these ceremonies with perfect precision, understanding not merely the required actions, but their deeper significance within the cosmic framework. The rituals Adapa conducted went far beyond simple offerings or prayers. He orchestrated complex ceremonies that aligned human activities with celestial movements, ensuring that agricultural work, construction projects, and community decisions occurred at cosmically appropriate times. His knowledge of divine preferences and requirements enabled him to craft offerings that genuinely pleased the gods, securing their continued protection and blessing for the human community. As king, Adapa provided temporal leadership that reflected divine principles of justice and order. His decisions drew upon his understanding of cosmic law, ensuring that human governance aligned with divine will. He established legal principles that would influence human societies for generations, creating frameworks for resolving disputes, organizing community labor, and maintaining social harmony. Adapa's unique position between mortal and immortal realms manifested in his daily existence. He experienced human emotions and physical sensations while simultaneously perceiving divine realities invisible to ordinary mortals. This dual awareness created both tremendous capability and considerable burden. He could understand divine motivations and cosmic necessities that might seem harsh or incomprehensible to purely human perspectives, yet he also felt the full weight of human suffering and limitation. The sage's wisdom extended to practical knowledge that revolutionized human civilization. He understood the principles of agriculture that allowed communities to move beyond subsistence gathering, the astronomical observations necessary for accurate timekeeping, and the engineering concepts required for substantial construction projects. Under his guidance, Eridu developed sophisticated irrigation systems, monumental architecture, and complex social organization that served as models for subsequent human settlements. Adapa's knowledge of divine secrets included understanding of the fundamental forces that governed natural phenomena. He could predict weather patterns, interpret the significance of unusual natural events, and understand the cosmic influences that affected human affairs. This knowledge enabled him to guide his community through challenges that would have overwhelmed purely human leadership, providing warnings of impending difficulties and guidance for appropriate responses. The relationship between Adapa and his creator Ea remained complex and multifaceted. While Ea had granted his creation extraordinary capabilities, he also maintained divine prerogatives and expected appropriate deference. Adapa served not merely as an independent agent, but as an extension of Ea's will in the mortal realm, carrying out divine purposes while adapting them to human circumstances and limitations. This relationship required careful navigation of competing loyalties and responsibilities. Adapa owed his existence and capabilities to Ea, creating obligations of gratitude and service. Simultaneously, His role as leader of the human community in Eridu created responsibilities to mortal welfare that might sometimes conflict with divine preferences. The sage's wisdom included understanding how to balance these competing demands while maintaining the trust and favour of both divine and mortal constituencies. The deliberate limitation of Adapa's nature, particularly the withholding of immortality, created an inherent tension within his existence. His vast wisdom allowed him to perceive the cosmic order and understand his place within it. Yet his mortality meant that his time to fulfill his purpose remained finite. This limitation drove him to maximize his effectiveness during his mortal span, while also creating a poignant awareness of the temporary nature of his achievements. The sacred waters of the Apsu held secrets that only Adapa could truly comprehend, their depths reflecting not merely the physical world above, but the cosmic patterns that governed all existence. Each dawn brought him to these hallowed waters, with the solemnity of one who understood that his actions rippled through both mortal and divine realms. The fishing expedition that would alter the fundamental balance of creation began like countless others, with Adapa preparing his vessel and nets, according to rituals passed down through divine instruction. Adapa's daily journey to the fishing grounds represented far more than simple sustenance gathering. The fish he sought swimming in the sacred waters carried within their flesh the essence of divine blessing, making them perfect offerings for Ea's temple. These creatures, nurtured by the cosmic waters where sweet and salt mingled in perfect harmony, possessed qualities that distinguished them from ordinary fish found in mundane rivers and lakes. Their scales shimmered with an otherworldly luminescence that spoke of their connection to divine forces, and their flesh, when properly prepared and offered, could carry human prayers directly to the realm of the gods. The preparation for each fishing expedition required meticulous attention to ritual purity and cosmic timing. Adapa would rise before dawn, when the boundary between night and day remained fluid and divine influences moved most freely through the world. He purified himself with water drawn from the sacred springs, reciting incantations that aligned his mortal essence with the divine purposes he served. His fishing boat, crafted from wood blessed by Ea himself, bore inscriptions along its hull that identified it as a vessel engaged in sacred work rather than mere commercial enterprise. The nets Adapa employed had been woven according to divine specifications, their patterns reflecting mathematical relationships that governed cosmic order. Each knot tied during their construction followed prescribed rituals, and the materials used carried blessing from multiple divine sources. The weight stones attached to the nets came from quarries sacred to various deities, ensuring that every aspect of the fishing process maintained proper divine connections. These preparations transformed what might appear to be simple fishing into a complex ritual performance that sustained the relationship between Eridu and its patron deity. As Adapa guided his vessel across the sacred waters, he remained acutely aware of the various forces that governed this liminal space. The winds that filled his sail carried messages between divine realms, and their patterns revealed information about cosmic conditions that affected both divine moods and mortal affairs. The four cardinal winds each possessed distinct personalities and responsibilities within the cosmic order, and experienced navigators like Adapa learned to read their intentions through subtle changes in pressure, temperature and direction. The south wind, known as Shutu among the divine powers, held particular significance in the cosmic hierarchy. This wind carried the breath of desert places, the scorching heat that could wither crops and dry up water sources essential for human survival. Yet Shutu also served crucial functions within the divine order, carrying prayers from southern lands to the celestial realms and maintaining the atmospheric balance that prevented any single climatic force from dominating the world. The south wind possessed a fierce temperament that demanded respect from mortals who encountered its power, and its relationship with human activities often proved volatile and unpredictable. On the morning that would transform cosmic history, Adapa detected subtle signs that suggested unusual atmospheric conditions. The water surface displayed patterns that indicated conflicting wind currents, and the behavior of birds overhead suggested that powerful forces were stirring in the heavenly regions. Despite these omens, his responsibilities to Ea's temple demanded that he proceed with the fishing expedition. The daily offerings could not be interrupted without risking divine displeasure, and Adapa's role as intermediary required him to maintain the ritual schedule regardless of personal concerns about potentially dangerous conditions. The initial hours of fishing proceeded normally, with Adapa's nets drawing in the sacred fish whose sacrifice would maintain the divine mortal covenant. His boat moved steadily through the waters as he worked the nets with practiced skill, reading the currents and depths with understanding gained through years of experience and divine guidance. The fish he caught displayed the proper signs of divine blessing, their scales reflecting light in patterns that confirmed their suitability for temple offerings. As the morning progressed, however, the atmospheric conditions began to deteriorate in ways that exceeded normal weather variations. The south wind, which had been merely restless earlier, began to manifest with increasing violence and apparent malevolent intent. Shutu's breath grew scorching hot, creating thermal currents that disrupted the natural flow of air across the water surface. The wind's pattern became erratic and aggressive, suggesting that some divine disturbance was affecting the south wind's normal behavior. Adapa recognized the signs of supernatural agitation in Shutu's manifestation, but his obligations to complete the sacred fishing expedition prevented immediate retreat to shore. The temple's daily requirements could not be abandoned simply because of difficult weather conditions, and his role as Ea's chosen intermediary demanded that he demonstrate proper dedication to divine service. He adjusted his sailing technique to compensate for the increasingly hostile wind conditions, using his knowledge of divine temperaments to navigate the growing atmospheric chaos. The south wind's assault on Adapa's vessel intensified beyond anything he'd previously experienced. Shutu seemed to have developed a personal animosity toward the sage's fishing expedition, directing powerful gusts specifically at his boat, with apparent deliberate intent to disrupt the sacred work. The wind's behavior transcended normal meteorological patterns, displaying the focused malevolence of a divine being, expressing displeasure or pursuing some cosmic agenda that remained hidden from mortal understanding. Massive gusts struck Adapa's boat with tremendous force, threatening to tear the sail from its moorings and snap the mast that had been blessed by Ea himself. The sacred nets, weighted with consecrated stones and woven according to divine specifications, became tangled and damaged as the violent wind created chaotic water conditions. Fish that had been caught for temple offerings were lost overboard as the boat pitched and rolled under Shutu's relentless assault. The catastrophic moment arrived when a particularly vicious gust from the south wind struck Adapa's vessel with such force that it capsized completely, throwing the sage into the sacred waters along with his carefully prepared offerings and ritual equipment. The boat, which had served faithfully in countless fishing expeditions and carried the blessings of multiple divine powers, was reduced to floating wreckage scattered across the water surface. Years of accumulated sacred implements, blessed nets, and ritual tools disappeared beneath the waves or drifted away beyond recovery. Adapa found himself struggling in the churning waters as Shutu continued its assault, the south wind seeming to take perverse pleasure in the destruction it had wrought. The sacred fish intended for temple offerings swam away into the depths, their divine essence lost to the chaos created by the wind's malevolent intervention. The daily ritual that maintained cosmic order and divine favour had been shattered by what appeared to be deliberate divine interference with established cosmic protocols. The full implications of this disaster extended far beyond personal inconvenience or material loss. The disruption of the daily offerings threatened the delicate balance of relationships between Eridu and its divine protectors. Ea's temple required the regular provision of sacred fish to maintain the rituals that ensured divine protection for the human community. Without these offerings, the cosmic connections that sustained civilization itself could begin to deteriorate, potentially exposing humanity to various supernatural dangers and divine displeasure. As Adapa struggled to reach the surface and assess the extent of the catastrophe, his divine wisdom revealed the cosmic significance of Shutu's actions. The south wind had not merely interfered with a fishing expedition, but had attacked the fundamental structures that maintained order between divine and mortal realms. This assault represented a violation of cosmic protocols that demanded response, yet the appropriate nature of that response remained unclear given the complex hierarchies and competing loyalties that govern divine relationships. The rage that built within Adapa as he witnessed the destruction of his sacred work transcended normal human anger. His divine wisdom allowed him to perceive the full implications of Shutu's actions, understanding how this seemingly isolated incident threatened the entire framework of divine mortal cooperation that he had been created to maintain. The south wind had not merely damaged his boat and scattered his offerings, but had challenged the authority of Ea himself by interfering with rituals conducted under divine mandate. Drawing upon the cosmic knowledge that Ea had embedded within his creation, Adapa formulated a response that would demonstrate the power granted to him as a divine intermediary. His understanding of the fundamental forces that govern natural phenomena revealed the specific vulnerabilities that even divine winds possessed when confronted by properly applied metaphysical principles. The curse he prepared would target the essential nature of Shutu's existence, striking at the source of the south wind's power rather than merely expressing impotent human frustration. The words that Adapa spoke carried the full weight of divine authority granted to him by Ea, channeled through his rage at the violation of cosmic order. His curse invoked principles of cosmic justice that demanded punishment for entities that disrupted established divine protocols. The language he employed drew upon secret names and hidden relationships between natural forces, knowledge that had been granted to him during his creation, but which he'd never before been compelled to use in such a destructive manner. The effect of Adapa's curse manifested immediately and dramatically. Shutu's wings, the metaphysical structures that allowed the south wind to move across the world and fulfill its cosmic functions, shattered under the impact of the sage's divine wrath. The sound of breaking that echoed across the sacred waters resembled the cracking of enormous bones, a cosmic fracture that sent ripples through multiple levels of reality. The south wind's voice, which had been howling with malevolent pleasure moments before, transformed into a shriek of pain and surprise as its essential nature was fundamentally altered. The immediate aftermath of the curse revealed its unprecedented power and scope. Shutu, which had been a force of tremendous destructive potential capable of reshaping landscapes and influencing weather patterns across vast regions, suddenly found itself unable to maintain its normal functions. The south wind's ability to carry heat from desert regions, transport moisture between different climatic zones, and maintain the atmospheric pressure balances that supported normal weather patterns had been severed by Adapa's divine wrath. The cosmic consequences of silencing one of the 4 cardinal winds began to manifest almost immediately. The atmospheric system that governed weather patterns across the known world depended on the interaction between all 4 cardinal winds, each contributing essential elements to the complex dance of air currents that maintained climatic stability. With Shutu disabled, the remaining 3 winds found themselves unable to maintain proper balance, creating atmospheric disturbances that rippled outward from the sacred waters where the curse had been pronounced. The silence where the south wind's voice should have been created an eerie calm that felt more ominous than peaceful. The natural world seemed to hold its breath, sensing that fundamental cosmic structures had been altered in ways that would produce far-reaching consequences. Birds that normally rode the wind currents found themselves disoriented by the absence of familiar atmospheric patterns, and the behavior of other natural phenomena began to reflect the disruption of established cosmic order. The cosmic fracture that Adapa had unleashed upon Shutu sent tremors through the very foundations of the celestial realm. In the highest reaches of heaven, where the great god Anu maintained his supreme throne surrounded by the assembled host of the Anunnaki, the absence of the south wind's voice created a disturbance that could not be ignored. The king of the gods, whose authority extended over all cosmic forces and whose awareness encompassed the entirety of creation, felt the disruption as a physical wound in the fabric of reality itself. Anu's throne room occupied a space that transcended normal architectural concepts, its dimensions shifting according to the cosmic significance of events transpiring within its boundaries. The walls, constructed from crystallized starlight and reinforced with the essence of primordial chaos, reflected the eternal nature of divine authority while providing perfect acoustic properties that allowed the supreme god to hear every whisper of disturbance throughout creation. The floor, polished to mirror-like perfection from stones that had witnessed the birth of the first stars, served as a scrying surface through which Anu could observe events occurring in any realm of existence. The moment Shutu's wings shattered under Adapa's curse, the harmonic resonance that normally filled Anu's throne room shifted into a discordant pattern that immediately attracted the supreme god's attention. The 4 cardinal winds had always maintained a precise musical relationship in their cosmic dance, their combined voices creating a symphony that provided the background melody for all divine deliberations. The sudden absence of the south wind's contribution created a jarring silence that felt like a missing note in an otherwise perfect composition. Anu's investigation into this unprecedented disruption began with a systematic examination of the cosmic forces under his authority. The supreme god possessed awareness that extended simultaneously across all levels of reality, allowing him to perceive events occurring in the mortal realm while maintaining complete understanding of their divine implications. His consciousness moved like a searching beam across the various domains of existence, seeking the source of the disturbance that had altered the fundamental patterns of creation. The discovery that one of the cardinal winds had been rendered completely powerless by mortal action struck Anu with a combination of surprise and growing anger. Throughout the countless ages of his reign, no mortal being had ever demonstrated the capability to affect cosmic forces of such magnitude. The cardinal winds were fundamental components of the universal order, their functions essential to maintaining the stability of both divine and mortal realms, The fact that a creature of clay and divine breath had somehow acquired the power to disable such forces represented a challenge to the established hierarchy that demanded immediate investigation. Anu's examination of the incident revealed the precise nature of Adapa's curse and the sophisticated understanding of cosmic principles that had made such an attack possible. The supreme god recognized the specific techniques employed in the curse, noting their derivation from knowledge that should have been restricted to divine beings of the highest rank. The mathematical relationships invoked in the curse, the secret names employed to target Shutu's essential nature, and the metaphysical principles used to sever the wind's wings all pointed to a level of divine wisdom that exceeded what any mortal should possess. The implications of a mortal wielding such power extended far beyond the immediate disruption of atmospheric patterns. If Adapa could disable one of the cardinal winds, what other cosmic forces might be vulnerable to his divine knowledge? The stability of the entire universal order depended on the understanding that certain powers remained exclusively within divine control, beyond the reach of mortal ambition or anger. The sage's demonstration of unprecedented capability threatened to upset the delicate balance that had maintained cosmic stability since the earliest ages of creation. Anu's anger at this violation of cosmic protocol manifested as a slow-burning divine wrath that began to affect the atmospheric conditions throughout the celestial realm. The air around his throne grew thick with the pressure of barely contained fury, and the crystalline walls of his throne room began to resonate with harmonics that reflected his emotional state. The assembled Anunnaki, who maintained constant attendance upon their supreme ruler, felt the weight of his displeasure as a physical force that made even divine beings uncomfortable in his presence. The decision to summon Adapa before the divine tribunal represented both an assertion of supreme authority and a recognition of the sage's unique status within the cosmic hierarchy. No ordinary mortal could survive the journey to the celestial realm, let alone appear before the assembled host of the Anunnaki, without being instantly destroyed by exposure to such concentrated divine power. The fact that Anu was willing to bring Adapa into his presence indicated both the seriousness of the offence and an acknowledgement that this particular mortal possessed qualities that distinguished him from ordinary humanity. The summons itself took the form of a divine decree that rippled through the various levels of reality, carrying with it the full weight of Anu's supreme authority. The words of command were inscribed upon the cosmic winds themselves, written in characters of living flame that burned their message into the fundamental structure of creation. Every divine being throughout the celestial hierarchy became immediately aware of the summons, understanding that momentous events were about to unfold that would affect the entire cosmic order. The news of Anu's decision reached Ea in his subterranean palace, beneath the sweet waters of the Apsu, where the god of wisdom maintained his own throne room surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of ages. Ea's domain reflected his nature as keeper of divine secrets and master of hidden wisdom, its libraries containing scrolls that recorded every significant event since the beginning of creation, and its workshops housing the tools used to craft the fundamental forces that governed existence. Ea's reaction to the summons revealed the complex emotions that his creation's actions had stirred within the divine consciousness. Pride in Adapa's demonstration of the wisdom that had been so carefully instilled during his creation, mingled with concern about the consequences that such a display of power might bring. The god of wisdom had always understood that his masterwork possessed capabilities that approached divine levels, but he'd hoped that Adapa's mortal nature would provide sufficient restraint to prevent conflicts with the higher divine authorities. The position in which Ea found himself required careful navigation between competing loyalties and responsibilities. As a member of the divine hierarchy, he owed absolute obedience to Anu's authority and could not openly oppose the supreme god's decisions regarding cosmic justice. The established order of divine relationships demanded that he respect the king of the god's right to investigate and punish violations of cosmic protocol regardless of his personal feelings about the specific case involved. Simultaneously, Ea's relationship with Adapa created obligations that went beyond simple creator's pride. The sage had been fashioned as an extension of Ea's own will in the mortal realm, designed to serve as intermediary between divine and human concerns while carrying out specific functions that supported cosmic order. Adapa's actions in cursing the south wind, while technically violations of divine prerogative, had been motivated by legitimate anger at Shutu's interference with sacred rituals conducted under Ea's direct authority. The god of wisdom recognized that Adapa's curse had been both justified and excessive, reflecting the inherent tensions built into the sage's nature during his creation. The divine knowledge that enabled Adapa to serve effectively as intermediary between realms also provided him with capabilities that could challenge established cosmic hierarchies when employed without proper restraint. Ea had deliberately created this tension, understanding that effective mediation between divine and mortal concerns required a being who could understand both perspectives while maintaining independence from either. The preparation of Adapa for his journey to the celestial realm required Ea to balance his protective instincts with recognition of cosmic realities that even divine wisdom could not alter. The god understood that his creation would face judgment before the assembled Anunnaki, where the slightest misstep could result in immediate destruction or punishments that would affect not only Adapa himself, but the entire human community that depended on his mediation. The preparation process needed to provide Adapa with the knowledge and protection necessary for survival, while avoiding any actions that might be interpreted as defiance of Anu's authority. Ea's first concern involved the physical challenges that Adapa would face during his celestial journey. Mortal beings were not designed to survive exposure to the concentrated divine power that permeated the heavenly realm, where the very air carried energies that could instantly incinerate ordinary flesh and bone. The sage's enhanced nature provided some protection against such forces, but additional safeguards would be necessary to ensure his survival during the extended exposure to divine presence that the tribunal would require. The protective measures that Ea devised drew upon his mastery of the subtle forces that governed the interaction between mortal and divine natures. He crafted specific incantations that would create a buffer zone around Adapa's physical form, allowing him to maintain his mortal nature while temporarily gaining resistance to the destructive aspects of divine energy. These protections required careful calibration to provide adequate defense without altering Adapa's essential nature in ways that might be interpreted as attempts to grant him divine status. The god of wisdom also recognized the need to prepare Adapa psychologically for the overwhelming experience of appearing before the supreme divine tribunal. The assembled Anunnaki represented the most powerful collection of divine beings in existence, their combined presence creating an atmosphere of authority and judgment that could crush mortal consciousness simply through its intensity. Adapa would need to maintain his composure and demonstrate proper respect, while simultaneously defending his actions and preserving his dignity as Ea's chosen representative. The briefing that Ea provided covered the complex protocols that governed behavior in the divine presence, the proper forms of address for various ranks of divine beings, and the subtle diplomatic considerations that could influence the outcome of the tribunal. The god of wisdom shared knowledge of the individual personalities and preferences of the major Anunnaki, providing Adapa with insights that might help him navigate the dangerous currents of divine politics that would surround the proceedings. Ea's most crucial decision involved the extent to which he could provide direct protection for his creation without violating his own obligations to divine authority. The god understood that too obvious an intervention on Adapa's behalf might be interpreted as defiance of Anu's judgment, potentially escalating the conflict to include divine versus divine confrontation that could have catastrophic consequences for the entire cosmic order. The protection he offered needed to be subtle enough to avoid detection while providing genuine assistance during the most critical moments of the tribunal. The final preparations included specific instructions regarding Adapa's behavior during his celestial journey and appearance before the divine court. Ea emphasized the importance of maintaining proper humility while avoiding any appearance of weakness that might invite additional punishment. The sage would need to acknowledge the seriousness of his actions while presenting them in a context that demonstrated their justification within the cosmic order that he had been created to maintain. The moment of departure approached with a gravity that both creator and creation understood might mark the end of their unique relationship. The journey to the celestial realm carried risks that even Ea's wisdom could not fully calculate, and the judgment that awaited Adapa there might result in punishments that would fundamentally alter or destroy the sage's nature. The god of wisdom had invested centuries of planning and divine power in his creation, and the possibility of losing that investment to cosmic justice created emotions that challenged even divine equanimity. As Adapa prepared to leave the familiar confines of the earthly realm for the terrifying majesty of the celestial court, both he and his creator understood that the cosmic order itself hung in the balance, awaiting the outcome of a confrontation between mortal wisdom and divine authority that would establish precedents affecting the relationship between heaven and earth for ages to come. The weight of cosmic judgment pressed upon the sacred chambers beneath the Apsu, as Ea contemplated the unprecedented situation his creation now faced. The god of wisdom understood that Adapa's journey to the celestial realm would require more than divine protection. It demanded strategic preparation that could navigate the treacherous currents of heavenly politics while preserving both the sage's life and his essential mission as intermediary between realms. The instructions Ea would provide needed to account for every possible scenario that might unfold in Anu's court, where a single misstep could result in consequences affecting not only Adapa, but the entire framework of divine-mortal relations. Ea's preparation began with a detailed analysis of the celestial court's structure and the various power dynamics that influence decision-making within the divine hierarchy. The supreme god Anu maintained absolute authority over cosmic justice, but his judgments were inevitably influenced by the counsel and attitudes of the assembled Anunnaki, who served as his advisors and administrators. Each of these divine beings possessed distinct personalities, preferences, and areas of concern that could be leveraged to Adapa's advantage if properly understood and approached. The god of wisdom recognized that Adapa's survival depended not merely on demonstrating proper respect for divine authority, but on presenting his case in ways that aligned with the cosmic principles that the Anunnaki were sworn to uphold. The sage's curse against the south wind, while technically a violation of divine prerogative, had been motivated by legitimate concerns about the disruption of sacred rituals essential to maintaining cosmic order. This justification needed to be presented carefully, emphasizing Adapa's role as protector of divine mortal covenant, rather than as a rebellious mortal challenging heavenly authority. Ea's first set of instructions focused on the proper protocols for approaching and addressing the Supreme Divine Tribunal. The celestial court operated according to ancient traditions that had been established during the earliest ages of creation, and violations of these protocols could be interpreted as signs of disrespect that would prejudice the assembled gods against any arguments Adapa might present. The sage would need to demonstrate his understanding of divine hierarchy through every gesture, word, and movement during his appearance before the court. The initial approach to Anu's throne required specific positioning and movement patterns that acknowledged the supreme god's authority while maintaining the dignity appropriate to Adapa's status as Ea's chosen representative. The sage would need to advance to a precise distance from the throne, close enough to demonstrate courage and confidence, but far enough to avoid any suggestion of presumption or challenge to divine supremacy. His posture throughout the proceedings would need to balance humility with the bearing of one who had been granted divine wisdom and authority. The forms of address that Adapa would employ required careful consideration of each divine being's rank, responsibilities, and personal preferences within the celestial hierarchy. Anu himself demanded the most elaborate honorifics, acknowledging his position as king of the gods and supreme arbiter of cosmic justice. The other Anunnaki required forms of address that recognized their specific domains of authority, while maintaining the proper gradations of respect that reflected their positions relative to both Anu and each other. Ea provided detailed guidance on reading the subtle signs that would indicate the tribunal's mood and the direction of their deliberations. The positioning of various divine beings within the throne room, the colours and intensity of the divine auras that surrounded them, and the harmonic patterns of their voices would all provide crucial information about their attitudes toward Adapa's case. The sage's survival might depend on his ability to recognize shifts in divine opinion and adjust his presentation accordingly. The most critical aspect of Ea's strategic counsel involved the warning about the offerings that Anu might present during the tribunal proceedings. The supreme god possessed the authority to offer various substances to those who appeared before his court, and these offerings carried profound significance that extended far beyond simple hospitality. The choices that Adapa made regarding these offerings would be interpreted as indicators of his intentions, loyalties, and understanding of his proper place within the cosmic order. Ea's knowledge of divine psychology and cosmic law revealed that Anu would likely test Adapa's wisdom and loyalty through the presentation of what appeared to be food and drink, but which actually represented fundamental choices about the sage's future existence. The supreme god possessed the power to grant immortality through the bread and water of eternal life, substances that could transform mortal nature into divine essence and elevate Adapa to a position among the lesser gods. However, Ea's understanding of Anu's character and the cosmic implications of the current situation suggested that the supreme god would more likely offer the bread of death and water of death, substances that would appear identical to their life-giving counterparts, but which carried the power to instantly destroy any mortal being who consumed them. This test would serve multiple purposes within the context of divine justice, providing Anu with a means to eliminate a potentially dangerous mortal, while simultaneously testing whether Adapa possessed the wisdom necessary to recognize and avoid cosmic traps. The god of wisdom emphasized that Adapa must refuse any food or drink offered by Anu, regardless of how the offerings were presented or what promises might accompany them. The supreme god's reputation for subtle testing and indirect punishment meant that accepting divine hospitality could be interpreted as either presumption or foolishness, both of which would justify severe punishment. The refusal needed to be conducted with appropriate respect and gratitude, acknowledging the honor of the offer while explaining the reasons for declining in terms that demonstrated proper understanding of cosmic hierarchy. Ea's instructions regarding the refusal of divine offerings included specific phrases and gestures that would convey the appropriate message without causing offense. Adapa would need to express his recognition that such divine substances was too elevated for mortal consumption, emphasizing his understanding of his proper place within the cosmic order, while simultaneously demonstrating the wisdom that justified his unique position as intermediary between realms. The Strategic Council extended to identifying and appealing to potential allies within the Celestial Court who might influence the Tribunal's final judgment. Ea's analysis of the divine personalities likely to be present revealed two figures whose support could prove crucial to Adapa's survival: Dumuzi and Ningishzida, the divine beings who served as gatekeepers of heaven and who possessed significant influence over access to the celestial realm. Dumuzi, the shepherd god whose domain included the pastoral aspects of mortal life, maintained particular concern for the welfare of human communities and the preservation of the divine mortal covenant that sustained civilized society. His experiences with mortal affairs had given him understanding of the challenges faced by beings who existed at the intersection of divine and human concerns, making him potentially sympathetic to Adapa's situation. Ningishzida, the serpent god associated with the Tree of Life and the boundaries between different realms of existence, possessed deep knowledge of the cosmic principles that governed transformation and transcendence. His role as guardian of divine thresholds gave him particular insight into the delicate balance required to maintain proper relationships between different levels of reality. Ea's strategy for gaining the support of these crucial figures involved presenting Adapa in a manner that would appeal to their specific concerns and responsibilities. The god of wisdom advised his creation to appear before the gatekeepers wearing mourning garments that would immediately communicate his recognition of the cosmic disruption his actions had caused and his genuine remorse for the unintended consequences of his curse against the south wind. The mourning attire would serve multiple symbolic functions within the context of divine politics. It would demonstrate Adapa's understanding that his actions had caused genuine harm to the cosmic order, showing appropriate regret for the disruption of the south wind's essential functions. The garments would also appeal to Dumuzi's pastoral sensibilities by showing concern for the agricultural and climatic disruptions that Shutu's silence had created. For Ningishzida, the mourning dress would indicate proper recognition of the boundaries that had been crossed and the cosmic relationships that had been damaged. The specific details of the mourning garments required careful consideration to ensure they conveyed the intended message without suggesting excessive self-abasement that might be interpreted as weakness. The fabric would need to be of appropriate quality to reflect Adapa's status as Ea's representative, while incorporating traditional symbols of regret and cosmic awareness. The colours and patterns would follow ancient protocols for expressing remorse before divine authority, while maintaining the dignity necessary for effective advocacy. Ea's psychological preparation of Adapa for the overwhelming experience of facing Anu's wrath involved detailed explanation of the sensory and emotional assaults that exposure to supreme divine anger would create. The king of the gods possessed the power to manifest his displeasure as physical force that could crush mortal consciousness, and his voice carried harmonics that could shatter the mental structures that maintained individual identity. Adapa would need to prepare his mind and spirit to withstand these attacks while maintaining the clarity of thought necessary for effective self-defense. The techniques that Ea taught for surviving divine wrath drew upon the meditative practices that had been incorporated into Adapa's original design, enhanced with specific mental exercises that would provide additional protection against psychological assault. The sage would need to establish internal barriers that could maintain his essential identity while allowing him to function in the presence of overwhelming divine power. These mental preparations required practice and reinforcement through repeated exposure to controlled divine energies within Ea's own domain. The God of Wisdom also provided guidance on maintaining proper perspective during the tribunal proceedings, helping Adapa understand that Anu's anger, while genuinely dangerous, was also a test of character and wisdom that could be survived through appropriate preparation and response. The Supreme God's reputation for justice meant that excessive punishment was unlikely if Adapa could demonstrate proper understanding of cosmic principles and genuine commitment to maintaining divine mortal harmony. The final elements of Ea's counsel addressed the long-term implications of whatever judgment the tribunal might render and the ways that Adapa could continue to fulfill his essential functions regardless of the specific punishments or restrictions that might be imposed. The sage's role as intermediary between realms was too important to the cosmic order to be completely eliminated, but the form that role would take after the tribunal might be significantly altered by Anu's decisions. Ea emphasized that Adapa's primary responsibility throughout the proceedings would be to preserve not only his own existence, but the essential mission for which he had been created. The human communities that depended on his mediation could not be abandoned simply to avoid divine punishment, and the cosmic balance that his work maintained was too crucial to be sacrificed for personal survival. The sage would need to find ways to accept whatever judgment was rendered, while ensuring that his essential functions could continue in some form. The preparation concluded with Ea's final blessing and the activation of the protective measures that would shield Adapa during his celestial journey. The God of Wisdom had done everything within his power to prepare his creation for the ordeal ahead, but the ultimate outcome would depend on Adapa's ability to apply the lessons he had received while navigating the treacherous currents of divine justice that awaited him in the Supreme Court of Heaven. As Ea's final blessing settled upon Adapa's shoulders, like an invisible mantle of protection, the sage felt the familiar boundaries of earthly existence begin to dissolve around him. The summoning power of Anu's decree manifested as a force that transcended normal concepts of travel or movement, lifting Adapa from the sacred chambers beneath the Apsu and carrying him through layers of reality that existed beyond mortal comprehension. The transition from the terrestrial realm to the celestial sphere occurred not as a gradual ascent, but as a series of instantaneous translations between different planes of existence, each shift accompanied by sensations that challenged the limits of Adapa's enhanced mortal nature. The first celestial sphere through which Adapa passed contained the domain of atmospheric forces, where the winds that governed earthly weather patterns maintained their primary residence when not engaged in their terrestrial duties. The space itself defied conventional architectural description, its boundaries shifting according to the movements of air currents that carried the essence of different climatic conditions. Massive columns of crystallized air supported a ceiling that displayed the ever-changing patterns of weather systems as they developed and dissipated across the mortal world below. Within this realm, Adapa encountered the immediate consequences of his curse against Shutu. The south wind lay motionless in a corner of the great hall, its form resembling a fallen titan whose wings had been shattered into countless fragments of solidified heat and desert breath. The other three cardinal winds, the north wind with its burden of ice and snow, the east wind carrying the fresh moisture of dawn, and the west wind bearing the accumulated wisdom of sunset, maintained their positions around their fallen companion, their voices creating a mournful harmony that spoke of cosmic disruption and unbalanced forces. The sight of Shutu's broken form created a complex mixture of emotions within Adapa's consciousness. His divine wisdom allowed him to perceive the full extent of the damage his curse had inflicted, recognizing that the south wind's essential nature had been fundamentally altered in ways that would require divine intervention to repair. The mathematical precision of the cosmic forces that governed atmospheric balance had been disrupted by the removal of one crucial component, creating ripple effects that would continue to manifest until proper restoration could be achieved. The second celestial sphere contained the realm of stellar influences, where the constellations that guided mortal affairs maintained their eternal dance across the heavens. This space expanded infinitely in all directions, filled with points of light that represented not merely distant stars, but the fundamental principles that governed fate, destiny, and the cosmic patterns that influenced earthly events. The floor beneath Adapa's feet consisted of polished obsidian that reflected the stellar patterns above, creating the illusion of walking through an infinite void filled with celestial fire. Here, the sage encountered the scribal deities who recorded the fates of mortals and maintained the complex calculations that determined the influence of celestial bodies on earthly affairs. These divine beings, their forms composed of living starlight and mathematical symbols, paused in their eternal work to observe Adapa's passage through their domain. Their attention felt like the weight of accumulated knowledge pressing against his consciousness, evaluating his worthiness to continue the celestial journey and measuring the cosmic significance of his unprecedented summons before Anu's tribunal. The stellar realm revealed the broader implications of Adapa's actions in ways that his earthly perspective had not previously allowed him to comprehend. The disruption of the south wind's function had created imbalances in the atmospheric patterns that influenced agricultural cycles, which in turn affected the seasonal celebrations that maintained proper relationships between human communities and their divine protectors. The scribal deities' records showed cascading effects that would continue to propagate through the cosmic order until the fundamental disruption could be addressed through divine intervention. The third celestial sphere encompassed the domain of planetary influences, where the wandering stars that govern the more immediate aspects of mortal existence maintained their complex orbital relationships. This realm resembled a vast mechanical construction, with crystalline spheres rotating around central axes according to mathematical principles that determined their influence on earthly affairs. The sound of their movement created a cosmic music that provided the harmonic foundation for all divine deliberations, each planetary voice contributing specific tones that reflected their individual characteristics and responsibilities. The planetary deities who governed this realm possessed forms that shifted between human-like appearances and abstract geometric patterns that represented their essential mathematical natures. Their observation of Adapa carried particular intensity because planetary influences operated more directly on mortal affairs than the distant stellar powers, making them acutely aware of how cosmic disruptions affected the human communities under their care. The sage could feel their evaluation of his character and motivations, their divine senses probing the depths of his consciousness to determine whether his actions represented genuine concern for cosmic order or dangerous mortal presumption. The fourth celestial sphere contained the realm of divine messengers and intermediary powers, beings whose function paralleled Adapa's own role as mediator between different levels of existence. This space took the form of a vast library whose shelves extended beyond visual limits, filled with scrolls and tablets that recorded every communication between divine and mortal realms since the beginning of creation. The air itself carried the whispered echoes of countless prayers, offerings, and divine responses that had shaped the ongoing relationship between heaven and earth. The messenger deities who inhabited this realm showed particular interest in Adapa's passage, recognizing him as a unique example of their own mediating function elevated to unprecedented levels of authority and capability. Their forms appeared as constantly shifting combinations of divine and mortal characteristics, reflecting their nature as beings who existed primarily to facilitate communication between different orders of existence. Their evaluation of Adapa focused on his effectiveness as an intermediary and the ways his actions had either supported or undermined the delicate balance of divine-mortal relations. The fifth and final celestial sphere through which Adapa passed contained the outer courtyard of Anu's heavenly palace, a space that served as the threshold between the lower celestial realms and the supreme divine presence. The architecture of this realm reflected the absolute authority of the king of the gods, with walls constructed from crystallized divine will and floors that displayed the reflection of Anu's thoughts, as they shaped the fundamental structures of reality. The air itself carried the weight of supreme divine power, creating pressure that challenged even Adapa's enhanced nature to withstand. The approach to the gates of heaven required Adapa to traverse a vast courtyard filled with divine beings of various ranks and functions, all of whom had gathered to witness the unprecedented spectacle of a mortal being summoned before Anu's tribunal. The assembled crowd included lesser gods responsible for specific aspects of cosmic administration, divine servants who maintained the celestial palace's daily operations, and messenger spirits who carried communications between different divine domains. Their collective attention created an atmosphere of intense scrutiny that pressed against Adapa's consciousness like a physical weight. The gates of heaven themselves stood as monuments to divine craftsmanship and cosmic authority, their height extending beyond visual perception and their width capable of accommodating the passage of entire divine processions. The metal from which they had been forged contained elements that existed only within the celestial realm, materials that reflected light in patterns that revealed the mathematical principles underlying all cosmic order. Inscriptions covering their surface recorded the fundamental laws that govern divine-mortal relations, written in characters that shifted between different divine languages according to the observer's level of understanding. At these mighty gates stood Dumuzi and Ningishzida, the divine guardians whose responsibility included controlling access to Anu's presence and evaluating the worthiness of those who sought audience with the supreme god. Their positioning at this crucial threshold reflected both their individual authority within the celestial hierarchy and their collective function as arbiters of divine-mortal interaction. The success or failure of Ea's diplomatic strategy would be determined by Adapa's ability to gain their support during this critical encounter. Dumuzi's appearance reflected his dual nature as both divine being and shepherd of mortal flocks, his form displaying the robust physicality of one accustomed to pastoral labour, while radiating the otherworldly presence that marked his divine status. His clothing combined the practical garments of a working shepherd with ceremonial elements that indicated his elevated position within the celestial court, creating an overall impression of accessible authority that invited confidence while demanding respect. His eyes held the patient wisdom of one who had spent countless ages observing the struggles and triumphs of mortal communities, and his bearing suggested genuine concern for the welfare of those who existed at the intersection of divine and human concerns. Ningishzida's form embodied the serpentine wisdom associated with his role as guardian of cosmic boundaries and keeper of transformative knowledge. His human-like torso merged seamlessly with serpentine coils that displayed scales of iridescent copper and gold, each scale inscribed with symbols that represented different aspects of the cosmic principles he protected. His multiple arms held various implements of divine authority, including staffs that could measure the boundaries between different realms of existence, and tablets that recorded the laws governing transformation and transcendence. His expression conveyed the analytical intelligence of one whose function required precise understanding of the delicate balances that maintained cosmic stability. The moment of Adapa's approach to these gatekeepers represented the crucial test of Ea's strategic preparation and the sage's ability to implement the diplomatic guidance he had received. The mourning garments that Adapa wore according to his creator's instructions immediately communicated his recognition of the cosmic disruption his actions had caused, their somber colours and traditional patterns indicating appropriate regret while maintaining the dignity necessary for effective advocacy before divine authority. Dumuzi's reaction to Adapa's appearance revealed the success of Ea's psychological analysis of the shepherd god's character and concerns. The divine gatekeeper's expression softened as he observed the mourning attire, recognizing in the sage's presentation a genuine understanding of the agricultural and climatic disruptions that the south wind's silence had created. The pastoral communities under Dumuzi's protection had already begun to experience the effects of atmospheric imbalance, with unusual weather patterns affecting crop growth and livestock behavior in ways that threatened the stability of rural societies. Ningishzida's evaluation of Adapa focused on the cosmic implications of the sage's unprecedented demonstration of divine-level power and the ways such capabilities might affect the fundamental boundaries that separated different orders of existence. The serpent god's analytical intelligence probed the depths of Adapa's consciousness, seeking to understand the source of the knowledge that had enabled such a devastating curse and the intentions that had motivated its use. His assessment would determine whether Adapa represented a genuine threat to cosmic stability or a valuable asset whose unique capabilities could be channeled towards maintaining divine mortal harmony. The conversation that developed between Adapa and the divine gatekeepers unfolded according to the protocols that Ea had carefully outlined, with the sage demonstrating proper respect for their authority while explaining his actions in terms that emphasized their justification within the cosmic order. His presentation stressed his role as protector of the sacred rituals that maintained divine mortal covenant, portraying his curse against Shutu as a defensive response to unprovoked interference with divinely mandated activities, rather than an aggressive challenge to cosmic authority. The gatekeeper's growing sympathy for Adapa's position reflected both the effectiveness of Ea's diplomatic strategy and the genuine merit of the sage's case when presented in proper context. Dumuzi's concern for the welfare of mortal communities made him particularly receptive to arguments that emphasized Adapa's protective intentions, while Ningishzida's understanding of cosmic balance allowed him to appreciate the complex factors that had contributed to the unfortunate confrontation with the south wind. Their decision to advocate for Adapa before the Supreme Tribunal represented a crucial victory that significantly improved the sage's chances of survival during the upcoming judgment. The support of the divine gatekeepers carried considerable weight within the celestial court. Their reputation for careful evaluation and sound judgment lending credibility to their assessment of Adapa's character and motivations. Their advocacy would provide a foundation of divine support that should influence the attitudes of other Anunnaki during the tribunal proceedings. The passage through the gates of heaven marked Adapa's transition from the outer celestial realms to the inner sanctum where Anu maintained his supreme authority over all cosmic affairs. The space beyond the gates defied conventional description, its dimensions shifting according to the cosmic significance of events transpiring within its boundaries while maintaining perfect acoustic properties that allowed every whisper to reach the supreme god's awareness. The walls displayed the eternal patterns of creation and destruction that governed all existence, their surfaces reflecting the fundamental mathematical relationships that determined the structure of reality itself. The assembled pantheon of Mesopotamian deities filled the vast throne room with a concentration of divine power that pressed against Adapa's enhanced consciousness like a crushing weight. Each god and goddess present represented specific aspects of cosmic administration, their combined authority encompassing every force that influenced both divine and mortal affairs. Their individual auras created a complex pattern of overlapping energies that revealed the intricate relationships and competing interests that shaped divine politics and decision-making. At the centre of this overwhelming assembly stood Anu's throne, a construction that embodied the absolute authority of the king of the gods, while serving as the focal point for all cosmic order and justice. The throne itself appeared to be carved from a single crystal that contained the concentrated essence of divine will, its faceted surfaces reflecting the thoughts and intentions of its occupant, while amplifying the power of his pronouncements throughout all realms of existence. The steps leading to the throne were inscribed with the fundamental laws that governed divine-mortal relations, each character glowing with the accumulated authority of countless ages of divine rule. Anu himself presented an appearance that combined the familiar characteristics of divine kingship with the otherworldly presence that marked his unique position as supreme arbiter of cosmic justice. His physical form displayed the idealized proportions associated with divine perfection, while his bearing conveyed the accumulated wisdom and authority of one who had ruled over the cosmic order since the earliest ages of creation. His eyes held depths that seemed to contain the entire history of existence, and his voice carried harmonics that could reshape the fundamental structures of reality through the power of divine command. The moment of Adapa's presentation before this supreme assembly represented the culmination of his unprecedented journey through the celestial realms and the ultimate test of both his wisdom and his courage. The sage stood in the presence of beings whose individual power exceeded that of entire mortal civilizations, facing judgment for actions that had challenged the established cosmic order, while simultaneously defending the principles that justified his unique existence as intermediary between realms. The weight of supreme divine authority pressed down upon the crystalline throne room as Anu's penetrating gaze fixed upon Adapa, who stood motionless in the centre of the vast celestial court. The king of the gods leaned forward slightly on his throne of concentrated divine will, his movement causing ripples of energy to cascade through the assembled Anunnaki. The silence that had fallen over the divine assembly carried an electric tension that made even immortal beings shift uncomfortably in their positions around the throne room's perimeter. Anu's voice, when it finally broke the oppressive quiet, carried harmonics that resonated through multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. The supreme god's words manifested not merely as sound, but as fundamental alterations to the cosmic atmosphere, each syllable weighted with the accumulated authority of countless millennia of divine rule. His interrogation began with a directness that cut through any possibility of evasion or diplomatic maneuvering. The king of the gods demanded immediate explanation for the unprecedented assault upon one of the cardinal winds, his questions probing not merely the mechanics of how Adapa had accomplished such a feat, but the deeper motivations that had driven a mortal being to challenge cosmic forces of such magnitude. Anu's inquiry revealed his understanding that the curse against Shutu represented far more than simple anger or frustration. It demonstrated access to divine knowledge and power that should have remained beyond mortal reach. The supreme god's examination of Adapa's motives began with systematic deconstruction of the events that had led to the South Wind's destruction. Anu possessed complete awareness of every detail surrounding the incident, from the atmospheric conditions that had prevailed over the sacred waters to the specific ritual preparations that Adapa had undertaken before beginning his fishing expedition. The interrogation served not to gather information, but to test the sage's honesty and his understanding of the cosmic implications of his actions. Anu's questions revealed the depth of his concern about the precedent that Adapa's curse had established within the cosmic order. If one mortal being could disable a cardinal wind through the application of divine knowledge, what prevented other enhanced mortals from attempting similar challenges to cosmic authority? The stability of the entire universal hierarchy depended upon maintaining clear boundaries between divine and mortal capabilities, and Adapa's demonstration of unprecedented power threatened to undermine these fundamental distinctions. The interrogation proceeded through increasingly complex layers of cosmic law and divine prerogative, with Anu testing not only Adapa's understanding of what he'd done, but his comprehension of why such actions violated the established order. The supreme god's questions explored the relationship between divine wisdom and divine authority, probing whether Adapa recognized that knowledge alone did not grant the right to employ cosmic forces against other divine beings. Adapa's response to this overwhelming divine scrutiny demonstrated the effectiveness of Ea's preparation and the inherent wisdom that had been instilled during his creation. The sage's defense began with complete acknowledgement of the cosmic disruption his actions had caused, accepting full responsibility for the South Wind's destruction, while simultaneously establishing the context that had made such desperate measures necessary. His words carried the measured cadence of one who understood the weight of speaking before supreme authority, while maintaining the conviction of one who believed his actions had been justified. The sage's explanation of his sacred duty to provide for Ea's temple resonated through the throne room with the authority of established cosmic law. Adapa detailed the precise nature of his responsibilities as intermediary between divine and mortal realms, emphasizing that his fishing expeditions represented not personal activity, but divinely mandated ritual work essential to maintaining the covenant between heaven and earth. His description of the daily offerings required by Ea's temple demonstrated his understanding of the complex ceremonial obligations that sustained cosmic order. Adapa's account of Shutu's interference with these sacred activities revealed the South Wind's violation of established divine protocols. The sage explained how the wind's assault upon his vessel had prevented the completion of rituals that were essential to maintaining proper relationships between divine and mortal realms. His detailed description of the south wind's apparently deliberate targeting of his boat and the destruction of consecrated fishing equipment demonstrated that Shutu's actions had transcended normal meteorological phenomena to become active interference with divinely sanctioned activities. The eloquence with which Adapa presented his defense impressed even the most skeptical members of the divine assembly. His words demonstrated not merely intellectual understanding of cosmic principles, but genuine emotional investment in the preservation of divine mortal harmony. The sage's explanation revealed his recognition that his curse against Shutu, while technically a violation of divine prerogative, had been motivated by legitimate concern for the cosmic order that he had been created to maintain. The assembled Anunnaki found themselves responding to Adapa's presentation with growing admiration for both his wisdom and his courage. The divine beings who served as Anu's advisors and administrators recognized in the sage's words the voice of one who truly understood the delicate balance of forces that maintained cosmic stability. His willingness to accept responsibility for his actions, while simultaneously defending their necessity, demonstrated a level of moral sophistication that exceeded what most divine beings expected from mortal consciousness. Enlil, the god of wind and storm who held particular authority over atmospheric phenomena, found himself torn between anger at the assault upon one of his domain's fundamental forces and respect for the principles that had motivated Adapa's actions. The Lord of the Hurricane understood better than most divine beings the cosmic significance of the cardinal winds and the disruption that Shutu's silence had created throughout the atmospheric system. Yet he also recognized the validity of Adapa's complaints about the south wind's interference with sacred rituals. Inanna, the goddess of love and war, whose domain included the passionate emotions that drove both divine and mortal actions, observed Adapa's defense with growing appreciation for the complex motivations that had produced such unprecedented results. Her understanding of the relationship between emotional intensity and decisive action allowed her to perceive the genuine devotion to cosmic order that had transformed the sage's anger into such devastating divine power. Nergal, the god of war and plague whose own temperament included tendencies toward violent solutions to cosmic problems, found himself unexpectedly sympathetic to Adapa's position. The war god's experience with the necessity of decisive action in defense of cosmic principles made him receptive to arguments that emphasize protective rather than aggressive motivations for the assault upon the south wind. The growing sympathy within the divine assembly created a complex dynamic that Anu observed with increasing interest. The supreme god recognized that his advisor's reactions to Adapa's defense reflected genuine appreciation for the sage's unique position within the cosmic order and the unprecedented challenges that such a position created. The king of the gods found himself facing a judgment that required balancing the need to maintain divine authority against recognition of the legitimate concerns that had motivated the violation of that authority. Anu's own assessment of Adapa's character evolved throughout the extended interrogation, revealing aspects of the sage's nature that exceeded even the supreme god's initial expectations. The king of the gods had anticipated encountering either a rebellious mortal drunk on divine power, or a confused being overwhelmed by capabilities beyond his understanding. Instead, he found himself confronting a consciousness that combined genuine wisdom with unwavering commitment to cosmic order, a being whose actions, while technically violations of divine prerogative, had been motivated by the same principles that governed divine rule itself. The supreme god's recognition of Adapa's exceptional nature created a profound dilemma that challenged established precedents for cosmic justice. Traditional divine law provided clear guidelines for punishing mortals who challenged divine authority, but these precedents had been established based on cases involving ordinary humans motivated by pride, greed, or ignorance. Adapa represented an entirely new category of being, one whose violations of cosmic law stemmed from the same divine wisdom and protective instincts that motivated the gods themselves. The complexity of judging such a unique being required Anu to consider not merely the technical aspects of divine law, but the broader implications for cosmic order that different punishments might create. Excessive punishment of a being whose actions had been motivated by legitimate concern for divine mortal harmony could undermine the very principles that the punishment was intended to protect. Conversely, insufficient response to such a dramatic violation of a divine prerogative could encourage other enhanced mortals to attempt similar challenges to cosmic authority. The assembled Anunnaki watched their supreme ruler grapple with this unprecedented judicial challenge, recognizing that the precedent established by Adapa's case would influence divine mortal relations for countless generations to come. The gods who had initially expected a straightforward punishment of mortal presumption found themselves witnessing a complex examination of the fundamental principles that governed cosmic justice and the relationship between wisdom, authority, and responsibility within the universal order. Anu's contemplation of appropriate judgment revealed the depth of his own wisdom and the careful consideration he brought to decisions that would affect the cosmic order. The supreme god understood that his ruling in Adapa's case would establish precedents that would guide future interactions between divine and mortal realms, making the current judgment far more significant than a simple response to individual misconduct. The tension within the throne room intensified as the divine assembly awaited Anu's decision, each god and goddess understanding that the outcome would reflect not merely the fate of one exceptional mortal, but the fundamental principles that would govern cosmic justice in an age where the boundaries between divine and mortal capabilities were becoming increasingly complex and difficult to maintain. The silence that had gripped the celestial throne room began to shift as Anu's expression transformed from judicial severity to something far more complex and unexpected. The supreme god's eyes, which had been burning with the cold fire of cosmic authority, now displayed a contemplative depth that suggested his thoughts were moving in directions that none of the assembled Anunnaki had anticipated. The king of the gods leaned back upon his crystalline throne, his fingers drumming against its armrests in a rhythm that created subtle harmonic vibrations throughout the vast chamber. The divine assembly watched with growing bewilderment as their supreme ruler's demeanor underwent this unprecedented transformation. Enlil shifted uncomfortably in his position near the throne, his mastery over atmospheric forces making him acutely sensitive to the changing energy patterns that surrounded Anu's deliberation. Inanna's warrior instincts detected the shift in cosmic tension, while Nergal's experience with battlefield dynamics recognized the moment when established expectations were about to be completely overturned. Anu's voice, when it finally emerged from his extended contemplation, carried tones that no divine being present had ever heard from their supreme ruler. The harmonics that accompanied his words suggested not the pronouncement of punishment, but something that approached admiration, even wonder. The king of the gods spoke of wisdom that transcended normal mortal limitations, of devotion to cosmic order that rivaled the dedication shown by divine beings themselves, and of actions that, despite their technical violations of divine prerogative, demonstrated a profound understanding of the principles that governed universal harmony. The Supreme God's analysis of Adapa's character revealed depths of appreciation that shocked the assembled pantheon. Anu spoke of recognizing in the sage a consciousness that combined mortal perspective with divine understanding in ways that created unique value within the cosmic order. The king of the gods acknowledged that Adapa's curse against Shutu, while unprecedented in its violation of divine authority, had been motivated by the same protective instincts that drove the gods themselves to maintain cosmic stability against forces that threatened universal order. This unexpected divine assessment created a profound shift in the atmosphere surrounding the tribunal proceedings. The Anunnaki who had gathered expecting to witness the punishment of mortal presumption found themselves confronting their supreme ruler's recognition that traditional categories of divine justice might be inadequate for addressing the complexities presented by Adapa's unique nature. The sage's combination of mortal origins with divine-level wisdom and power created judicial challenges that existing cosmic law had never been designed to address. Anu's contemplation extended beyond the immediate question of punishment to consider the broader implications of Adapa's existence for the cosmic order itself. The supreme god recognized that beings like the sage represented a new category within the universal hierarchy, entities whose capabilities transcended normal mortal limitations while remaining fundamentally different from divine beings. The appropriate response to such unprecedented entities required careful consideration of how their treatment would affect the delicate balance between divine authority and mortal agency that sustained cosmic stability. The king of the gods began to articulate a perspective that stunned the assembled divine court with its radical departure from established precedent. Rather than viewing Adapa's demonstration of divine-level power as a threat to cosmic order, Anu suggested that such capabilities, when properly motivated and carefully employed, might actually serve to strengthen the universal hierarchy by providing more effective mediation between divine and mortal realms. The sage's willingness to risk divine wrath in defense of sacred rituals demonstrated the kind of commitment to cosmic principles that the gods valued in their own ranks. This revolutionary interpretation of Adapa's actions created visible consternation among the Anunnaki, who struggled to reconcile their supreme ruler's assessment with their own expectations about appropriate responses to violations of divine prerogative. Enlil's expression revealed his difficulty in accepting that an assault upon one of the cardinal winds could be interpreted as anything other than dangerous rebellion against cosmic authority. Inanna's warrior nature made her suspicious of any precedent that might encourage other mortals to challenge divine power, regardless of their stated motivations. Yet Anu's analysis continued to develop along lines that emphasized the positive aspects of Adapa's character and capabilities, rather than focusing solely on the technical violations of divine law that his actions had represented. The supreme god spoke of the sage's demonstrated wisdom in accepting full responsibility for his actions, while simultaneously maintaining his commitment to the cosmic principles that had motivated those actions. This combination of accountability and conviction suggested a level of moral sophistication that approached divine standards. The king of the gods' growing appreciation for Adapa's unique nature led him to consider responses that transcended traditional categories of punishment and reward. The supreme god began to contemplate the possibility that beings of Adapa's exceptional character and capability might deserve recognition and elevation rather than punishment, despite their technical violations of established divine prerogative. This radical departure from conventional divine justice reflected Anu's recognition that the cosmic order itself might benefit from acknowledging and incorporating such unprecedented entities, rather than simply suppressing them. The assembled pantheon watched with increasing amazement as their supreme ruler moved toward a decision that none of them had anticipated. The Anunnaki who had expected to witness the enforcement of traditional divine authority found themselves confronting a fundamental reevaluation of the principles that governed cosmic justice. Anu's willingness to consider unprecedented responses to unprecedented situations demonstrated the flexibility and wisdom that had maintained his position as king of the gods throughout countless ages of cosmic evolution. The supreme god's deliberation revealed his understanding that Adapa represented not merely an exceptional individual, but a harbinger of new possibilities within the cosmic order. The sage's combination of mortal perspective with divine-level capabilities suggested that the traditional boundaries between different orders of existence might be evolving in ways that required corresponding evolution in divine responses. The cosmic hierarchy had always been dynamic rather than static, adapting to changing conditions while maintaining its essential structures and principles. Anu's recognition of these broader implications led him toward a decision that would establish entirely new precedents for divine-mortal relations. Rather than viewing Adapa's case as an isolated incident requiring punishment, the supreme god began to see it as an opportunity to demonstrate divine wisdom and flexibility in responding to the emergence of new categories of beings within the universal order. The appropriate response would need to acknowledge both the violation of established law and the exceptional circumstances that had motivated that violation. The king of the gods rose from his crystalline throne, his movement causing waves of energy to ripple through the assembled divine court. The Anunnaki recognized the ceremonial significance of this gesture, understanding that their supreme ruler was preparing to pronounce a judgment that would carry implications far beyond the immediate case before them. The harmonic vibrations that accompanied Anu's movement suggested that his decision would fundamentally alter the cosmic precedents that govern divine mortal relations. Standing before his throne with the full authority of his supreme position radiating from his divine form, Anu began to articulate a judgment that defied every expectation held by the assembled pantheon. Instead of pronouncing punishment for Adapa's violation of divine prerogative, the king of the gods declared his intention to offer the sage the ultimate divine gift, immortality itself, granted through consumption of the bread of life and water of life that could transform mortal nature into divine essence. This unprecedented decision created shockwaves throughout the celestial throne room that manifested as visible distortions in the crystalline walls and floors. The assembled Anunnaki struggled to comprehend their supreme ruler's radical departure from established precedent, their divine consciousness reeling from the implications of elevating a mortal being to immortal status as reward for actions that technically constituted rebellion against cosmic authority. The very foundations of divine hierarchy seemed to tremble under the weight of such revolutionary judgment. Enlil's mastery over atmospheric forces made him acutely aware of the cosmic disruption that Anu's decision was creating throughout the celestial realm. The god of wind and storm felt the fundamental patterns that governed divine mortal relations shifting in response to this unprecedented elevation of mortal consciousness to divine status. The implications extended far beyond Adapa himself, to encompass every future interaction between divine and mortal realms. Inanna's warrior instincts detected the potential for chaos that such a dramatic precedent might create among mortal populations who learned of Adapa's elevation. The goddess of love and war understood how the promise of divine reward for challenging cosmic authority might inspire other enhanced mortals to attempt similar demonstrations of power, potentially destabilizing the entire system of divine mortal relations that had maintained cosmic order for countless ages. Nergal's experience with the destructive potential of uncontrolled change made him particularly sensitive to the dangers inherent in Anu's revolutionary decision. The god of war and plague recognized that precedents established by divine judgment carried implications that extended far beyond individual cases, creating expectations and possibilities that could fundamentally alter the nature of cosmic relationships. Yet Anu's explanation of his reasoning revealed the depth of wisdom that had guided his unprecedented decision. The supreme god spoke of recognizing in Adapa qualities that transcended normal categories of mortal and divine nature, characteristics that made the sage worthy of elevation to immortal status, regardless of the technical violations that had brought him before the divine tribunal. The king of the gods emphasized that true cosmic order required the flexibility to recognize and reward exceptional virtue wherever it appeared, even when that virtue manifested through actions that challenged established authority. The supreme god's justification for offering immortality to Adapa drew upon fundamental principles of cosmic justice that emphasized the importance of motivation and character over strict adherence to technical legal requirements. Anu argued that the sage's demonstrated commitment to maintaining divine mortal harmony, his willingness to risk divine wrath in defense of sacred principles, and his exceptional wisdom in understanding cosmic relationships made him worthy of divine status, regardless of the unconventional means through which these qualities had been revealed. This philosophical foundation for the unprecedented judgment created additional complexity within the Divine Assembly's response to their supreme ruler's decision. The Anunnaki found themselves confronting not merely an unusual application of divine authority, but a fundamental re-evaluation of the principles that governed cosmic justice. Anu's willingness to prioritize character and motivation over technical compliance with established law suggested possibilities for divine mortal relations that transcended traditional hierarchical boundaries. The practical implications of elevating Adapa to divine status through the gift of immortality extended throughout multiple levels of cosmic organization. The sage's transformation from mortal intermediary to immortal divine being would fundamentally alter his relationship with the human communities that had depended upon his mediation. His new status would provide him with capabilities and perspectives that might distance him from the mortal concerns that had originally motivated his protective actions. Simultaneously, Adapa's elevation would create unprecedented possibilities for divine mortal cooperation by establishing a divine being who retained intimate understanding of mortal limitations and concerns. His unique background would enable him to serve as an advocate for human interests within the divine hierarchy, while simultaneously representing divine principles to mortal communities with unparalleled effectiveness. The moment approached when Anu would present the sacred substances that could transform Adapa's mortal nature into divine essence, marking the culmination of the most revolutionary judgment in the history of cosmic justice. The assembled Anunnaki watched with a mixture of fascination and apprehension as their supreme ruler prepared to implement a decision that would establish entirely new precedents for the relationship between divine authority and exceptional mortal achievement. Adapa stood motionless before the supreme divine throne, his consciousness struggling to process the magnitude of what was being offered to him. The sage's divine wisdom allowed him to understand the cosmic significance of immortality, while his mortal nature created emotional responses to the possibility of transcending the limitations that had defined his existence since creation. The internal conflict between these competing perspectives would determine his response to Anu's unprecedented offer. The weight of Ea's warnings pressed heavily upon Adapa's consciousness as he contemplated the choice before him. His creator's detailed instructions about refusing any food or drink offered by Anu had been based on the assumption that the supreme god would test the sage through presentation of deadly substances disguised as divine hospitality. The possibility that Anu might instead offer genuine immortality had not been anticipated in Ea's strategic preparations, creating a crisis of decision that challenged every aspect of the sage's preparation for this celestial encounter. The bread of life and water of life that Anu commanded to be brought before Adapa appeared as substances of extraordinary beauty and obvious divine origin. The bread possessed a luminescence that suggested the concentrated essence of eternal existence, while the water displayed depths that seemed to contain the fundamental forces that sustained cosmic order itself. The very presence of these substances created atmospheric changes within the throne room that testified to their authentic divine nature and transformative power. The sacred substances before Adapa radiated divine power that filled the crystalline throne room with energies that transcended mortal comprehension. The bread of life appeared as a golden loaf whose surface displayed patterns that shifted between mathematical formulae governing cosmic order and hieroglyphic symbols representing the fundamental forces of existence. Its luminescence pulsed with rhythms that matched the heartbeat of creation itself, each pulse releasing waves of transformative energy that promised elevation beyond the limitations of mortal flesh. The water of life filled a chalice carved from a single sapphire that had been present at the universe's birth, its liquid depths containing swirling galaxies of light that represented the eternal currents flowing through all realms of existence. Anu's gesture toward these divine offerings carried the weight of supreme authority, combined with what appeared to be genuine benevolence toward the sage who had impressed him with such unprecedented wisdom and courage. The king of the gods spoke of recognizing in Adapa qualities that deserved elevation to divine status, emphasizing that the sage's demonstrated commitment to cosmic order and his willingness to accept responsibility for his actions marked him as worthy of immortality. The supreme god's words carried harmonics that suggested this offer represented not merely reward for past actions, but investment in future possibilities that Adapa's unique nature could provide for the cosmic order. The assembled Anunnaki watched this extraordinary scene with emotions that ranged from amazement to concern, their divine consciousness struggling to process the implications of their supreme ruler's unprecedented generosity. Enlil's mastery over atmospheric forces made him acutely aware of the cosmic currents that surrounded the sacred substances, recognizing their authentic divine nature while simultaneously feeling the disruption their presence created in the established patterns of divine mortal relations. The god of wind and storm understood that accepting these offerings would fundamentally alter not only Adapa's nature, but the entire framework within which divine and mortal realms interacted. Inanna's warrior instincts detected the profound transformation that immortality would create in Adapa's relationship with the human communities he had been created to serve. The goddess of love and war recognized that divine status would provide the sage with capabilities and perspectives that might gradually distance him from the mortal concerns that had originally motivated his protective actions. Her understanding of the complex dynamics that govern divine-mortal relations made her aware of how elevation to immortal status could paradoxically undermine the very qualities that had made Adapa valuable as an intermediary between realms. Nurgle's experience with the destructive potential of uncontrolled change made him particularly sensitive to the cascading effects that Adapa's transformation might create throughout the cosmic order. The god of war and plague understood how precedents established by divine judgment carried implications that extended far beyond individual cases, potentially inspiring other enhanced mortals to attempt similar demonstrations of power in hopes of achieving similar elevation. The stability of the entire divine hierarchy depended upon maintaining clear distinctions between mortal and immortal capabilities, and Adapa's elevation threatened to blur these crucial boundaries in ways that could prove catastrophic. Yet the beauty and obvious authenticity of the divine substances created a compelling argument for accepting Anu's unprecedented offer. The bread of life promised not merely extended existence, but participation in the eternal processes that governed cosmic order, while the water of life offered understanding that would encompass the fundamental principles underlying all creation. The transformation these substances would create would elevate Adapa beyond the limitations that had constrained his effectiveness as intermediary, providing him with divine authority to match his divine wisdom. Adapa's consciousness wrestled with the magnitude of the choice before him, his divine wisdom allowing him to perceive the cosmic implications of immortality, while his mortal nature created emotional responses to the possibility of transcending death itself. The sage understood that accepting Anu's offer would represent the ultimate vindication of his actions and the supreme recognition of his value within the cosmic order. The transformation would provide him with capabilities that could revolutionize the relationship between divine and mortal realms, creating unprecedented opportunities for cooperation and understanding between different orders of existence. However, the weight of Ea's warnings pressed heavily upon Adapa's decision-making process, creating internal conflict that challenged every aspect of his preparation for this celestial encounter. His Krita's detailed instructions about refusing any food or drink offered by Anu had been based on extensive knowledge of divine psychology and the testing methods commonly employed by the supreme god. Ea's warnings had emphasized that accepting divine hospitality could represent either presumption or foolishness, both of which would justify severe punishment rather than reward. The god of wisdom's strategic analysis had anticipated that Anu would test Adapa through presentation of substances that appeared to offer divine gifts, but actually carried the power to destroy any mortal being who consumed them. The bread of death and water of death were known to exist within Anu's arsenal of testing methods, substances that could appear identical to their life-giving counterparts, while carrying the concentrated essence of mortality and dissolution. Ea's warnings had been designed to protect Adapa from such traps by encouraging blanket refusal of any offerings from the supreme god. The apparent authenticity of the substances before Adapa created a crisis that Ea's strategic preparation had not anticipated. The bread and water displayed every characteristic of genuine divine offerings, their energy patterns matching the cosmic signatures associated with the true substances of immortality rather than their deadly counterparts. The harmonic vibrations they created within the throne room testified to their life-giving properties, while their visual appearance corresponded exactly to descriptions of the authentic bread of life and water of life that existed within divine law. Adapa's enhanced perception allowed him to analyze the substances with capabilities that exceeded normal mortal limitations, his divine wisdom providing insight into their fundamental nature that confirmed their authenticity. The mathematical patterns displayed on the bread's surface corresponded to genuine cosmic principles, rather than the deceptive formulae that might disguise deadly substances. The galaxies of light swirling within the water matched the eternal currents that flowed through authentic divine realms, rather than the stagnant darkness that would characterize waters of death. Yet the absolute nature of Ea's warnings created doubt that challenged even this sophisticated analysis. The god of wisdom had emphasized that no circumstances should lead Adapa to accept any food or drink from Anu, regardless of how authentic they might appear or what promises might accompany their presentation. Ea's understanding of divine psychology and his knowledge of Anu's character had led him to conclude that any offerings from the supreme god would represent tests rather than genuine gifts, making acceptance inherently dangerous regardless of apparent authenticity. The loyalty that Adapa felt toward his creator added emotional weight to these rational considerations, his consciousness recognizing that defying Ea's explicit instructions would represent a fundamental betrayal of the trust and care that had shaped his existence. The god of wisdom had invested tremendous effort in creating and preparing the sage for his unique role within the cosmic order, and his warnings had been motivated by genuine concern for Adapa's survival and effectiveness. Ignoring such carefully considered guidance would demonstrate ingratitude that violated the fundamental bonds between creator and creation. The complexity of competing loyalties created additional layers of difficulty within Adapa's decision-making process. His obligations to Ea demanded obedience to his creator's instructions, while his role as intermediary between divine and mortal realms required him to consider the broader implications of his choices for cosmic order. The possibility that Anu's offer represented genuine recognition of his value and potential created opportunities that could benefit not only himself, but the entire framework of divine-mortal relations that he'd been created to maintain. The assembled Anunnaki observed Adapa's internal struggle with growing fascination, their divine consciousness detecting the complex emotional and rational processes that governed his deliberation. The gods who had initially expected a straightforward acceptance or rejection of Anu's offer found themselves witnessing a profound examination of loyalty, wisdom, and cosmic responsibility that revealed depths of character they had not anticipated from mortal consciousness. The sage's careful consideration of competing factors demonstrated the sophisticated moral reasoning that had impressed Anu and earned the support of the divine gatekeepers. Dumuzi and Ningishzida, who had advocated for Adapa before the divine tribunal, watched with particular interest as their protege confronted the ultimate test of his wisdom and character. The divine gatekeepers recognized that the sage's response to Anu's offer would determine not only his individual fate, but the validity of their assessment of his exceptional nature. Their reputation within the celestial court depended partly upon the accuracy of their judgment regarding Adapa's worthiness for divine consideration. The tension within the throne room intensified as the moment of decision approached, divine and mortal consciousness alike recognizing that Adapa's choice would establish precedents affecting the cosmic order for countless generations. The sage's acceptance of immortality would create new possibilities for divine-mortal cooperation, while potentially undermining the hierarchical boundaries that maintained cosmic stability. His rejection would demonstrate loyalty to his creator, while potentially sacrificing opportunities that might benefit the entire universal order. Adapa's final decision emerged from the depths of his consciousness, with the clarity that came from complete commitment to principles that transcended personal advantage. The sage's divine wisdom revealed the fundamental truth that his greatest value lay not in his individual capabilities, but in his unwavering loyalty to the cosmic order and the divine beings who had created and shaped his existence. The trust that Ea had placed in him during his creation and preparation represented a sacred bond that could not be violated without destroying the very qualities that had made him worthy of divine attention. The words that Adapa spoke in response to Anu's offer carried the measured cadence of one who understood the full implications of his choice, while maintaining complete conviction in its correctness. The sage expressed profound gratitude for the supreme god's unprecedented recognition and generosity, acknowledging the honor inherent in being offered elevation to divine status, while simultaneously explaining his inability to accept such gifts. His refusal drew upon the loyalty he owed to Ea and the wisdom his creator had provided, presenting his decision as evidence of the very qualities that had earned Anu's admiration, rather than as rejection of divine favor. The supreme god's reaction to Adapa's refusal revealed a complex mixture of emotions that the sage's decision had created within divine consciousness. Anu's initial response carried disappointment at seeing such extraordinary potential remain constrained by mortal limitations, his divine nature recognizing the tremendous opportunities that immortality would have provided for advancing cosmic order through Adapa's unique capabilities. The king of the gods had genuinely believed that elevation to divine status represented the most appropriate recognition of the sage's exceptional character and achievements. Yet this disappointment gradually transformed into something approaching admiration as Anu contemplated the principles that had motivated Adapa's refusal. The supreme god recognized that the loyalty and wisdom that led the sage to reject immortality were the same qualities that had impressed the divine tribunal and earned him consideration for such unprecedented elevation. The unwavering commitment to his creator's guidance demonstrated exactly the kind of principled behavior that the cosmic order required from beings granted exceptional power and responsibility. The irony of the situation became apparent to the assembled Anunnaki as they witnessed their supreme ruler's growing appreciation for the very decision that had denied him the opportunity to reward exceptional virtue with divine status. Adapa's refusal demonstrated the depth of character that had made him worthy of immortality, while simultaneously preventing him from accepting the recognition that such character deserved. The paradox created by this situation revealed the complex relationship between wisdom, loyalty, and cosmic justice that govern divine mortal relations. Anu's pronouncement of Adapa's fate carried the weight of cosmic law, combined with genuine regret for opportunities that would remain unrealized. The king of the gods declared that the sage would retain his position as the wisest of mortals, his divine knowledge and understanding preserved while his mortal nature remained unchanged. The gifts that Ea had provided during Adapa's creation would continue to distinguish him from ordinary humanity, but the ultimate gift of immortality would remain beyond his reach due to his own principled refusal. The cosmic significance of this moment extended far beyond Adapa's individual fate to encompass the entire relationship between divine and mortal realms. The supreme god's recognition that the sage's loyalty to his creator represented a virtue worthy of respect rather than punishment established precedents that would influence divine justice for countless ages. The principle that unwavering commitment to cosmic order deserved recognition, even when it prevented the acceptance of divine rewards, would become a fundamental component of the moral framework governing divine-mortal relations. The establishment of Adapa's permanent status as the wisest of mortals created a unique category within the cosmic hierarchy that had never previously existed. The sage would possess divine-level knowledge and understanding while remaining subject to the limitations of mortal existence, creating unprecedented possibilities for mediation between realms while ensuring that his perspective remained grounded in mortal experience. His wisdom would guide human communities through challenges that exceeded normal mortal comprehension, while his mortality ensured that he remained connected to the concerns and limitations of those he served. The implications of Adapa's fate for humanity extended throughout the cosmic order in ways that would influence the development of mortal civilization for countless generations. The sage's rejection of immortality had sealed not only his own destiny, but that of the entire human species, establishing the permanent boundary between mortal and divine nature that would define human existence. The possibility of transcending mortality through divine favour had been offered and rejected, creating a precedent that would affect every future interaction between divine and mortal consciousness. The cosmic balance that emerged from this unprecedented tribunal reflected the complex interplay of wisdom, loyalty, and divine justice that governed the universal order. Adapa's fate demonstrated that exceptional virtue could earn divine recognition without necessarily resulting in elevation beyond mortal limitations, while his principled refusal of immortality established the enduring value of loyalty to cosmic order over personal advancement. The precedents established by this singular case would influence the relationship between heaven and earth throughout the remaining ages of creation, defining the boundaries and possibilities that would shape divine-mortal relations until the end of time itself. The journey back to the earthly realm unfolded as a gradual descent through layers of diminishing divine energy, each transition marking Adapa's return to the mortal world that had shaped his existence before the cosmic tribunal. The crystalline pathways that had carried him upward through the celestial spheres now guided his melancholic passage downward, their surfaces reflecting not the anticipation of divine judgment, but the weight of irrevocable decision. The atmospheric pressure that had challenged his enhanced mortal nature during his ascent now felt oppressive in an entirely different manner, each breath carrying the burden of knowledge about what had been offered and what had been refused. The stellar realm through which Adapa passed displayed patterns of light that seemed to mock his choice, the constellations arranging themselves in configurations that suggested paths not taken and possibilities forever closed. The scribal deities who recorded mortal fates observed his passage with expressions that combined respect for his principled decision with something approaching pity for the limitations he had chosen to maintain. Their cosmic ledgers would record his case as unprecedented, a mortal being who'd been offered divine status and had possessed the wisdom to refuse it, yet their divine consciousness could not entirely comprehend the loyalty that had motivated such a decision. The realm of planetary influences created atmospheric disturbances as Adapa traversed its mechanical spheres, the crystalline structures resonating with harmonics that reflected the cosmic disruption his tribunal had created. The planetary deities who governed immediate mortal affairs understood better than their stellar counterparts the implications of his choice for human civilization, recognizing that his refusal of immortality had sealed not only his individual fate, but that of the entire species he represented. Their evaluation of his decision carried complex mixtures of approval and regret, divine consciousness struggling to balance admiration for his loyalty against recognition of the opportunities that had been sacrificed. The atmospheric realm where the cardinal winds maintained their residence presented the most poignant aspect of Adapa's return journey. The south wind remained motionless in its corner of the great hall, Shutu's broken form serving as a permanent reminder of the cosmic disruption that had initiated the entire sequence of events leading to the celestial tribunal. The other three winds continued their mournful harmony around their fallen companion, their voices creating atmospheric patterns that would persist until divine intervention could repair the fundamental damage that Adapa's curse had inflicted upon the cosmic order. The sight of the south wind's continued suffering created profound emotional turmoil within Adapa's consciousness, his divine wisdom allowing him to perceive the full extent of the ongoing cosmic imbalance, while his mortal nature generated feelings of guilt and responsibility that transcended rational analysis. The knowledge that Anu had recognized the justification for his actions provided little comfort when confronted with the visible evidence of the destruction his curse had wrought. The mathematical precision of atmospheric balance remained disrupted, creating weather patterns throughout the mortal world that would continue to affect agricultural cycles and human communities until proper restoration could be achieved. The final transition from celestial realm to earthly existence occurred at the sacred waters of the Apsu, where Adapa's fishing expedition had begun the chain of events that had carried him before the supreme divine tribunal. The familiar sight of these hallowed waters, where sweet and salt mingled in perfect harmony under normal circumstances, now displayed the subtle distortions that reflected the ongoing atmospheric imbalance created by the south wind's silence. The fishing grounds that had provided daily sustenance for Ea's temple showed signs of the ecological disruption that cascaded from cosmic forces into mundane natural phenomena. Ea awaited his creation's return in the sacred chambers beneath the waters, the god of wisdom having observed the entire tribunal proceedings through his divine awareness while maintaining the careful neutrality that his position within the cosmic hierarchy required. The deity's expression revealed the complex emotions that Adapa's decision had stirred within divine consciousness. Pride in his creation's demonstration of unwavering loyalty mingled with regret for the opportunities that such loyalty had necessarily sacrificed. The god understood better than anyone the cosmic significance of the choice that had been made and the precedents it would establish for future divine-mortal relations. The reunion between creator and creation unfolded without the celebration that might have been expected following Adapa's survival of the Supreme Tribunal. Instead, their interaction carried the weight of mutual understanding about the irrevocable nature of the decision that had been made and its implications for both individual destiny and cosmic order. Ea's acknowledgement of his creation's loyalty provided validation for the choice, while simultaneously emphasizing the permanent limitations it had accepted. The god's wisdom encompassed full awareness of what immortality would have provided and what its rejection would cost, both for Adapa personally and for the broader mission he had been created to fulfill. The return to Eridu required Adapa to confront the human community that had depended upon his mediation during his absence, their daily lives having continued despite the cosmic drama that had unfolded in the celestial realm. The city's inhabitants had experienced the atmospheric disturbances created by the south wind's silence without understanding their divine origin, attributing unusual weather patterns and agricultural difficulties to natural causes rather than cosmic disruption. Their lack of awareness about the true source of these problems created additional burden for Adapa, who possessed complete knowledge of the connections between his actions and their consequences. while being unable to share such understanding with those who suffered from its effects. The Temple of Ea required immediate attention to restore the daily rituals that Adapa's absence had necessarily interrupted, the sacred fishing expeditions and ceremonial offerings that maintained the divine mortal covenant having been suspended during the period of cosmic judgment. The sage's return to these familiar responsibilities carried new weight following his confrontation with supreme divine authority, every ritual action now informed by direct experience of the cosmic forces that such ceremonies were designed to appease and maintain. His enhanced understanding of divine psychology and celestial politics provided deeper insight into the significance of ceremonial details that had previously been matters of tradition rather than comprehension. The restoration of temple activities revealed the extent to which Adapa's unique position had been altered by his celestial experience, his interactions with divine forces having created subtle changes in his consciousness that affected every aspect of his mediating function. The fishing expeditions that had once been routine exercises in providing temple offerings now carried awareness of the cosmic significance of atmospheric balance and the delicate relationships between divine forces that governed natural phenomena. His prayers and invocations drew upon direct knowledge of divine personalities and preferences gained through personal interaction with the assembled Anunnaki, creating unprecedented effectiveness in his ceremonial communications with celestial powers. The establishment of new religious traditions began almost immediately following Adapa's return. His direct experience of divine justice and cosmic law providing foundation for ritual practices that would guide human communities through challenges that exceeded normal mortal comprehension. The wisdom he had gained through his celestial journey created opportunities for developing ceremonial frameworks that could maintain proper relationships between divine and mortal realms while acknowledging the complex realities that governed such interactions. His understanding of divine psychology enabled him to craft rituals that would genuinely please celestial powers rather than merely following traditional forms without comprehension of their deeper significance. The teaching and responsibilities that Adapa assumed within Eridu's community reflected his recognition that the knowledge he had gained through his unprecedented experience carried obligations that extended beyond personal enlightenment to encompass the welfare of the human civilization he'd been created to serve. The cosmic principles he had observed during his tribunal could be adapted into practical guidance for mortal communities, providing frameworks for understanding the relationship between human actions and divine responses that would enable more effective cooperation between realms. His instruction focused on developing human wisdom that could recognize and respond appropriately to divine influences without attempting to challenge cosmic authority through presumptuous actions. The agricultural knowledge that Adapa shared drew upon his enhanced understanding of atmospheric forces and their influence on growing cycles, his direct observation of the cosmic disruption created by the south wind's silence, providing insight into the delicate balances that sustained productive farming. The techniques he developed for reading weather patterns and predicting seasonal variations enabled human communities to adapt their farming practices to accommodate the ongoing atmospheric imbalance while maximizing their ability to maintain adequate food production despite challenging conditions. His guidance proved particularly valuable during the extended period when Shutu's silence continued to affect normal climatic patterns. The legal principles that Adapa established within Eridu's governance structure reflected his direct experience of divine justice and the complex factors that influenced cosmic judgment, providing frameworks for human legal systems that could maintain social harmony while acknowledging the moral complexities that governed individual actions and their consequences. His understanding of how divine beings evaluated character and motivation enabled him to develop judicial procedures that emphasize the importance of intention and context, rather than focusing solely on technical compliance with established rules. The precedents he established would influence human legal thinking for countless generations, creating foundations for justice systems that balanced authority with wisdom. The astronomical observations that became central to Adapa's teaching drew upon his first-hand knowledge of celestial realms and the divine beings who governed cosmic forces, enabling him to develop calendrical systems that accurately reflected the mathematical relationships governing seasonal cycles and celestial movements. His understanding of how divine consciousness perceived time and cosmic patterns provided insight into the significance of specific dates and astronomical configurations that could guide human communities in timing their most important activities to align with favourable cosmic conditions. The observational techniques he developed would become fundamental components of human scientific knowledge. The burden of lost immortality manifested in Adapa's consciousness as a persistent awareness of the mortality that would eventually claim him, despite his exceptional wisdom and capabilities, creating a poignant tension between his divine-level understanding and his fundamentally limited existence. The knowledge that he possessed the wisdom of gods while remaining subject to the biological constraints of mortal flesh generated emotional responses that challenged even his enhanced psychological resilience. His awareness of cosmic principles that governed eternal existence contrasted sharply with his personal experience of time as a finite resource that diminished with each passing day. The isolation that accompanied Adapa's unique position within the cosmic hierarchy became increasingly apparent as his enhanced understanding created growing distance between his consciousness and that of ordinary human beings, their concerns and limitations appearing increasingly foreign to his perspective, despite his continued commitment to their welfare. The divine knowledge he possessed enabled him to perceive patterns and relationships that remained invisible to normal mortal awareness, creating communication challenges that complicated his efforts to share wisdom in forms that human communities could comprehend and apply. His role as intermediary required constant translation between divine and mortal perspectives that grew more difficult as his own consciousness became increasingly informed by celestial rather than terrestrial experience. The melancholic acceptance of his fate that settled upon Adapa's consciousness reflected his complete understanding of the choice he had made and its permanent consequences, his divine wisdom providing clear awareness of what immortality would have offered, while his loyalty to Ea prevented any regret about the decision to refuse such gifts. The knowledge that he had impressed the supreme god sufficiently to earn an offer of divine status provided validation for his character and capabilities, while simultaneously emphasizing the limitations that his principled choice had accepted. His consciousness carried the weight of knowing that he had been found worthy of transcending mortality, while choosing to remain bound by its constraints. The establishment of Adapa's legacy began during his own lifetime, as human communities recognized the unprecedented nature of his wisdom and sought to preserve his teachings for future generations, creating the first systematic attempts to record and transmit divine knowledge through purely human institutions. The schools that developed around his instruction would become centers of learning that maintained cosmic wisdom long after his mortal existence ended, ensuring that the knowledge gained through his celestial experience would continue to guide human civilization through challenges that exceeded normal mortal comprehension. His influence on human intellectual development would persist throughout the remaining ages of creation, shaping the fundamental approaches that mortal consciousness would employ in seeking to understand divine will and cosmic order. The centuries that followed Adapa's return from the celestial tribunal witnessed the gradual transformation of his personal experience into the foundational mythology that would define Mesopotamian civilization's understanding of wisdom, mortality, and divine human relationships. His unprecedented journey to Anu's court and the cosmic judgment he had faced became the template against which all subsequent tales of divine encounter would be measured, establishing narrative patterns that would echo through countless generations of storytelling and religious instruction. Within the sacred precincts of Eridu, Adapa's daily activities took on ritualized significance that extended far beyond their practical functions. The fishing expeditions that had once been simple exercises in providing temple offerings became elaborate ceremonial performances that attracted observers from distant communities. Each aspect of his technique studied and memorized by aspiring priests, who sought to understand the cosmic principles underlying his exceptional effectiveness. His method of reading atmospheric conditions, selecting appropriate fishing grounds, and timing his expeditions according to celestial influences provided practical instruction in divine-mortal cooperation that could be adapted to various forms of religious and secular activity. The agricultural innovations that Adapa introduced drew upon his enhanced understanding of cosmic forces and their terrestrial manifestations, creating farming techniques that could maintain productivity despite the ongoing atmospheric disruption caused by the south wind's continued silence. His development of irrigation systems that could adapt to irregular weather patterns demonstrated practical applications of divine knowledge that enabled human communities to thrive, even under challenging cosmic conditions. The mathematical principles he employed in designing these systems reflected his direct observation of celestial mechanics during his journey through the divine realms, translating cosmic order into earthly engineering that would serve as models for subsequent technological development. The establishment of Adapa as the prototype of the Seven Sages emerged through a gradual process of mythological development that recognized his unique position as the first mortal being to achieve direct communication with supreme divine authority while maintaining his essential humanity. The tradition that would eventually identify 7 primordial sages who had brought civilization to humanity found its origin in Adapa's demonstration that mortal consciousness could comprehend and apply divine wisdom without losing its fundamental connection to human experience. His example established the possibility that exceptional individuals could serve as conduits for a cosmic knowledge while remaining grounded in mortal concerns and limitations. The Apkallu tradition that developed around this concept created a framework for understanding how divine wisdom entered human civilization through specially chosen intermediaries who possessed capabilities that exceeded normal mortal limitations while remaining subject to the constraints of earthly existence. These 7 sages were conceived as beings who had been granted direct access to divine knowledge through various forms of celestial encounter, their individual stories reflecting different aspects of the relationship between cosmic wisdom and human application. Adapa's position as the first among these figures established him as the archetypal sage whose experience provided the template for understanding how divine mortal mediation could function within the cosmic order. The influence of Adapa's tribunal experience on Mesopotamian legal thinking manifested in the development of judicial principles that emphasized the importance of motivation and context in determining appropriate responses to violations of established authority. His demonstration that technically rebellious actions could be justified by legitimate concern for cosmic order created precedents for legal reasoning that balanced strict adherence to law with recognition of exceptional circumstances that might warrant flexible interpretation. The concept that loyalty to higher principles could justify apparent disobedience to immediate authority became a fundamental component of Mesopotamian legal philosophy, influencing everything from royal administration to temple governance. The astronomical knowledge that Adapa acquired through his celestial journey provided the foundation for mathematical and observational techniques that would become central to Mesopotamian scientific achievement. His direct experience of the cosmic mechanics governing celestial movements enabled him to develop calendrical systems that accurately predicted seasonal changes, lunar cycles, and planetary positions with unprecedented precision. The observational methods he established created institutional frameworks for maintaining astronomical knowledge that would persist throughout Mesopotamian civilization, ensuring that cosmic wisdom gained through divine encounter would continue to serve practical human needs long after its original source had been forgotten. The theological implications of Adapa's refusal of immortality created profound questions about the nature of divine justice and the relationship between mortal virtue and cosmic reward that would influence Mesopotamian religious thinking for millennia. His demonstration that supreme divine authority could recognize and respect mortal loyalty even when such loyalty prevented the acceptance of divine gifts established precedents for understanding how gods might respond to human faithfulness. The principle that unwavering commitment to established relationships deserved recognition regardless of personal cost became a cornerstone of Mesopotamian religious ethics, influencing both individual devotional practices and institutional religious policies. The concept of wisdom as both blessing and burden emerged from contemplation of Adapa's unique position within the cosmic hierarchy, his possession of divine-level understanding while remaining subject to mortal limitations, creating a paradigm for understanding the complex relationship between knowledge and happiness. His experience demonstrated that exceptional wisdom necessarily involved awareness of cosmic realities that could create emotional and psychological challenges exceeding those faced by ordinary human consciousness. The recognition that divine knowledge carried obligations and burdens that might outweigh its practical benefits became a recurring theme in Mesopotamian literature and philosophy. The establishment of educational institutions based on Adapa's teaching methods created systematic approaches to transmitting divine wisdom through purely human channels, developing pedagogical techniques that could preserve cosmic knowledge across generations despite the mortality of individual teachers. The schools that emerged from his instruction emphasized the importance of understanding underlying principles rather than merely memorizing traditional practices, creating intellectual frameworks that could adapt divine wisdom to changing circumstances while maintaining essential cosmic connections. These educational approaches would become models for knowledge transmission throughout ancient Near Eastern civilizations. The literary traditions that developed around Adapa's story created narrative structures that would influence storytelling throughout Mesopotamian culture, establishing patterns for tales of divine encounter that emphasized the complex moral choices faced by exceptional individuals caught between competing loyalties and obligations. His experience provided a template for exploring themes of wisdom versus power, loyalty versus ambition, and mortal limitation versus divine possibility that would appear in countless subsequent myths and legends. The psychological depth of his character as presented in these narratives established standards for literary complexity that would influence ancient Near Eastern literature for centuries. The ritualization of Adapa's fishing expeditions created ceremonial practices that maintained symbolic connection to his original cosmic encounter, while providing practical frameworks for ongoing divine-mortal communication. The specific techniques he had employed in preparing for his fishing trips became elaborate ritual sequences that priests could perform to ensure divine favor for various community activities. These ceremonies preserved the essential elements of his approach to divine communication while making them accessible to religious practitioners who lacked his exceptional capabilities, creating institutional methods for maintaining cosmic connections that could function without requiring individual divine encounter. The architectural principles that emerged from Adapa's understanding of cosmic order influenced the design of temples and civic buildings throughout Mesopotamian civilization, creating structural elements that reflected celestial patterns while serving practical earthly functions. His knowledge of the mathematical relationships governing divine realms provided guidance for construction projects that could maintain proper connections between terrestrial and celestial spheres through their physical design. The integration of astronomical observations into architectural planning created building techniques that aligned human activities with cosmic forces in ways that supported both practical efficiency and religious effectiveness. The development of writing systems that could preserve and transmit the complex knowledge Adapa had acquired through his celestial experience created some of the earliest attempts to record divine wisdom in forms that could survive the mortality of individual human memory. The scribal traditions that emerged from these efforts established institutional frameworks for maintaining cosmic knowledge that would become central to Mesopotamian administrative and religious systems. The techniques developed for encoding complex theological and astronomical information in written form would influence the development of literacy throughout ancient Near Eastern civilizations. The medical knowledge that Adapa derived from his understanding of cosmic forces and their influence on human health created healing practices that integrated divine wisdom with practical therapeutic techniques, establishing approaches to medicine that addressed both physical symptoms and their underlying cosmic causes. His recognition of the connections between atmospheric conditions, seasonal cycles, and human well-being enabled him to develop treatments that could maintain health despite the ongoing climatic disruption caused by the south wind's silence. These medical approaches would become foundational elements of Mesopotamian healing traditions, influencing therapeutic practices throughout the ancient world. The agricultural festivals that developed around Adapa's teaching created seasonal celebrations that maintained community connection to cosmic cycles while providing practical frameworks for coordinating farming activities according to divine influences. These festivals integrated astronomical observations with agricultural planning, creating ceremonial occasions that served both religious and economic functions within human communities. The timing and structure of these celebrations reflected Adapa's understanding of how celestial forces influence terrestrial activities, providing guidance that enabled communities to maximize their agricultural productivity while maintaining proper relationships with divine powers. The concept of the tragic hero that would become central to later literary traditions found its earliest expression in contemplation of Adapa's fate. His possession of exceptional wisdom and divine recognition, combined with permanent exclusion from immortality, creating a paradigm for understanding how individual greatness could coexist with fundamental limitation. His story established the template for narratives that explored the complex relationship between human achievement and cosmic justice, demonstrating how exceptional virtue could earn divine admiration without necessarily resulting in transcendence of mortal constraints. This thematic framework would influence literary development throughout the ancient world, providing models for exploring the relationship between individual excellence and universal order. The establishment of Adapa's permanent legacy within Mesopotamian civilization reflected the enduring human need to understand the relationship between wisdom and mortality, divine favor and human limitation, exceptional achievement and universal law. His story provided a framework for comprehending how individual actions could have cosmic significance while remaining grounded in fundamentally human concerns and motivations. The themes his experience explored would continue to resonate throughout human intellectual and spiritual development, offering insights into the complex dynamics that govern the relationship between mortal consciousness and divine reality. The influence of Adapa's example on subsequent Mesopotamian concepts of kingship created ideals of royal authority that emphasized wisdom and divine communication rather than mere political power, establishing expectations that rulers should serve as intermediaries between divine and mortal realms, while maintaining proper humility before cosmic authority. His demonstration that exceptional capability carried corresponding obligations to serve cosmic order rather than personal ambition became a cornerstone of Mesopotamian political philosophy, influencing royal ideology throughout the region's historical development. As the centuries passed and Adapa's mortal existence drew toward its inevitable conclusion, the communities that had benefited from his wisdom began the process of institutionalizing his teachings in forms that could survive his death. The preservation of his knowledge required the development of systematic approaches to recording and transmitting complex information that would become foundational to Mesopotamian intellectual culture. His legacy lived on not merely in the specific techniques and insights he had provided, but in the institutional frameworks he had created for maintaining divine mortal communication across generations of human leadership. The final recognition of Adapa's significance within the cosmic order came not through divine elevation, but through his establishment as the eternal prototype of human wisdom operating within mortal limitations. His refusal of immortality had sealed his fate as the archetypal sage, whose greatness lay not in transcending human nature, but in demonstrating its highest possibilities while accepting its fundamental constraints. The wisdom he had gained through his celestial encounter would continue to guide human civilization long after his individual existence ended, proving that mortal achievement could have lasting cosmic significance even without achieving divine status. In the end, Adapa's legacy represented the enduring truth that the greatest human achievements often emerge from the willing acceptance of limitation rather than the desperate pursuit of transcendence, and that wisdom lies not in challenging the cosmic order but in understanding one's proper place within it while fulfilling that role with exceptional dedication and skill. His story became the eternal reminder that mortality, properly embraced, could achieve a form of immortality through the lasting influence of wisdom shared and principles upheld, ensuring that the first sage's impact on human civilization would endure as long as mortals sought to understand their relationship with the divine forces that shaped their existence.